If you look closely at her eyes, you can almost see the calculation. She didn't blink, she didn't stumble, and she definitely didn't break character. Elizabeth Holmes was the perfect Silicon Valley creation. She wore the black turtlenecks. She drank the green juice. She lowered her voice an entire octave to sound like a commander. She was the youngest female self-made billionaire in history, and she promised the world a miracle.
So what I can talk about is what I know and what I believe, which is that one of the incredible things about this country is that we can and do solve policy challenges through creativity and innovation. And
She claimed she could detect cancer, diabetes, and hundreds of other diseases with a single prick of a finger. No more needles. No more waiting. It was a lie that was worth $9 billion. But money is just paper. The real cost of Theranos wasn't the cash. It was the people who were told they were dying when they were healthy, and the people who were told they were healthy while they were dying. This is the story of how a 19-year-old dropout fooled the smartest man in the room, built a machine out of glue, sticks, and lies, and destroyed the lives of anyone who tried to tell the truth. To understand the fraud, you have to look inside the box. Elizabeth sold investors on a device called the Edison. It was supposed to be a miniature laboratory, a medical iPhone. In reality, the Edison was a joke. It wasn't a medical breakthrough. It was a modified industrial robot called a Fissner, originally designed to dispense glue in factories. Elizabeth's engineers hacked it to hold a pipette, but it was a disaster. The mechanical arm would jam. Tips would fall off. It couldn't run 200 tests. It could barely run one. So when Walgreens agreed to put Theranos centers in their stores, Elizabeth had a problem. She had millions of dollars in contracts and a machine that didn't work. When you gave your blood to Theranos, it didn't go into the Edison. It was secretly walked out the back door to a hidden lab full of standard commercial analyzers. Bought from Siemens, the same machines everyone else used. But there was a catch. Siemens machines need a full vial of blood. Theranos only had a tiny drop, so they had to hack the samples. They diluted the tiny drop of blood with saline to make it fill the vial. If you know anything about chemistry, you know what happens next. You dilute the sample. You dilute the evidence. The concentration of the virus or the protein becomes so low that the machine can't read it. The results weren't just inaccurate. They were random guesses. In the world of finance, if you lie, someone loses their investment. In medicine, if you lie, someone loses their life. Take the case of a patient we'll call DL. She went to Theranos and was told she had a serious autoimmune condition. Her doctors panicked. They put her on heavy medication. She spent months living in fear, changing her entire life, preparing for the worst. She didn't have it. The machine had hallucinated the disease. Or take Steve Hammonds. He was monitoring his blood-thinning medication. The Theranos test said his blood was too thick, so his doctor increased his dosage. The test was wrong. His blood became dangerously thin. He ended up needing heart surgery to drain fluid from around his heart, a procedure he likely never would have needed if the test had been accurate. While patients were being rushed to the ER, Elizabeth was on the cover of Fortune magazine. She knew the tests were failing. She knew the syphilis results were coming back wrong 30% of the time. She didn't recall the tests. She didn't pause the rollout. She kept smiling. There was one man who tried to stop it. Ian Gibbons. Ian was a brilliant British biochemist. He was the chief scientist at Theranos, and unlike Elizabeth, he actually understood the science. He told her repeatedly, "The technology does not work. We cannot launch this." But Theranos wasn't run by scientists. It was run by Sonny Balwani, Elizabeth's secret boyfriend and the company's enforcer. Sonny created a culture of terror. He tracked employees' key cards. He monitored their emails. He fired anyone who asked questions. Ian was trapped. He was 67 years old. He needed the health insurance. He couldn't just quit. But then, a lawsuit threatened to expose the company's secrets. Theranos lawyers demanded Ian testify. They wanted him to lie under oath to protect the trade secrets that didn't exist. Ian told his wife, "I cannot lie." But he knew if he told the truth, Sonny would destroy him. The pressure broke him. The night before his deposition, Ian Gibbons took a combination of wine and painkillers. He was found unconscious the next morning. He died a week later. When Elizabeth heard that her chief scientist, a man she had worked with for a decade, had killed himself, she didn't send flowers. She didn't write a condolence letter. She sent an email to his office. The subject line? "Please return the company laptop immediately." Elizabeth thought she was untouchable. She had the board of directors wrapped around her finger. We're talking about Henry Kissinger, Jim Mattis, and George Shultz, former Secretary of State. These were powerful men who saw Elizabeth as the granddaughter they never had. But George Shultz did have a grandson, Tyler Shultz. Tyler was a 22-year-old kid fresh out of Stanford. He got a job at Theranos because of his grandfather, but unlike the board members, Tyler was actually in the lab. He saw the glue bot. He saw the failed quality control checks. Tyler tried to do the right thing. He went to his grandfather's house. He sat him down in the living room and said, "Grandpa, she's lying to you. The machine is a fraud." Imagine being 22 and telling a legend of American politics that he's been conned. George Shultz looked at his grandson, and he picked Elizabeth. He told Tyler he was wrong. He told him to stop causing trouble. But it gets worse.
Laboratory that I had been in up to that time, and you could quickly tell that it couldn't run, hundreds of tests. It couldn't even run 2 tests at the same time, and while I was there, we only got up to running 7 tests total. And if you wanted to run all of those 7 tests at the same time, those would have had to been on 7 different devices. So her claims of running, 300 or whatever tests from a single drop of blood seemed grossly exaggerated. Working with the devices, and I would see that the variations of the results that it produces was very high. And then in our daily lab meetings, we would kind of go over the experiments that we had done in the previous 24 hours and kind of pick and choose about what experiments needed to be repeated. So we would essentially just delete sections of an experiment and repeat it and replace it with new data. And at first that seems kind of weird, but then you eventually kind of like fall into the habit of doing that, and it's a really bad habit. And then I started hearing about the quality controls failing, and this is with my colleagues who are running real patient samples. So they would run the quality controls for the day, and they would fail, and then some select cases they would be pressured to run patient samples anyway, even though we knew that the test wasn't functioning properly. And then quality controls would fail multiple days in a row, which is a really bad sign because statistically you should know how often a quality control should fail, and we were failing way more often than that, and we were coming up with ways on how to prevent reporting quality control failures. And then there was an incident where the CLIA inspectors came to inspect the laboratory, but they essentially locked the door to the room that had all the Theranos devices in, so they only saw like the third-party Siemens, FDA-cleared type equipment. And when we got that sample, we split it and we ran it on the Theranos devices and the Siemens equipment, and the results were off by sometimes more than 300%. And we decided to report the results from the Siemens equipment, not from the Theranos devices, even though we were running patient samples on the Theranos devices. Assay validation was really affecting quality controls and ultimately patient samples, and I felt like, our practices of what I'm doing here are so bad that it's affecting patients' results. So then I went and I had some questions, and I went to Elizabeth, and I kind of brought a couple of these things up. And she said,
During one of these meetings at the house, while Tyler was pleading his case, 2 lawyers from Theranos literally popped out of a back room. They had been hiding there, listening. They slapped Tyler with legal threats and tried to force him to sign a gag order. Tyler didn't sign. He became the anonymous source for the Wall Street Journal. His family disowned him. His parents had to mortgage their house to pay his $400,000 legal bills. But because he refused to shut up, the house of cards finally fell. Once the truth was out, the $9 billion valuation evaporated in hours. Elizabeth tried everything. She blamed Sonny. She got pregnant before her sentencing, hoping for sympathy. It didn't work. Today, the woman who wanted to be Steve Jobs is inmate number 249655050. She is currently serving an 11-year sentence in a Texas prison camp. As of 2026, her lawyers are still fighting. She's currently asking for a commutation, hoping that her connections can still save her one last time. But no amount of money can bring back Ian Gibbons, and no amount of PR can erase the terror of the patients she lied to. Theranos proved that in Silicon Valley, you can fake the product, you can fake the profit, and you can even fake your voice. But eventually, the math checks out. If you want to see how deep the rot goes in corporate America, you need to watch our breakdown of the Titan submersible. It's the same story: a CEO who ignored the warnings, fired the snitches, and paid the ultimate price.